I just want to make one point about making a space vehicle. Let's just assume we've got an engineering workshop somewhere in Western Supermare and say, well, let's design a space station or a space vehicle. What would you need? Okay, you're going to need a power source. Everything needs some kind of power source. So what could we use? Well, solar panels are 10 a penny these days. So we buy some solar panels. And you're going to need some kind of enclosure, some type of airtight enclosure. Now, a liquid oxygen tank can withstand, I think, up to about 18 times atmospheric pressure. If you were to buy one of them second-hand, that would do as your enclosure for a space vehicle. That could keep you alive in space. Okay, you attach it to your power source. Now, but you'd also need something to control the air inside and also the temperature. So you use your engineering workshop, you buy your second-hand liquid oxygen tank and your solar panels, and you bash it all together. Like I say, you need some kind of environmental and air control system, perhaps something similar that's used on a submarine. Now, here's our space vehicle that I've just designed. Now, that vehicle would probably cost you maybe, I don't know, a few tens of thousands of pounds to build, but that would go in orbit and it would keep you alive for just very little money. The point I'm trying to make is the difficult bit in space travel and in space vehicles is getting into space, okay? And in the past, we've always used rocketry, which is probably the most difficult part of space travel is getting into space, getting back, getting outside of the Earth's gravity field and getting outside of the Earth's atmosphere. They're the hard bits. If you had a piece of technology that could take your homemade spaceship for a few tens of thousands of pounds and stick it in space, you could survive in that bubble. As long as you had something else to bring it back down to Earth, it would work. So the point I'm trying to make is that they have discovered technology which can raise things into space without having to set fire to gases like hydrogen and oxygen. Now, anyone wonder what happened to the old Wembley Stadium? I'm not saying that Wembley Stadium is in orbit around the Earth. What I'm saying is that I believe that they have the technology to be able to do that if they so wished. Okay, because as long as you've got enough of these anti-gravity disks and have them in a big array, then you could raise that into space. So it's anyone's guess as to what they have got in space in terms of platforms. And Gary McKinnon shed some light on this when he broke into NASA computers and he allegedly found a photograph of a UFO. But he also found information, lists of officers' names on NASA computers. And we all know, anyone who knows the Gary McKinnon story, how much he has been persecuted by the American government, you know, to try and get him extradited. The guy's gone through hell for what he found out. And this is what he found out. I found a list of officers' names, he says, under the heading non-terrestrial officers. It doesn't mean little green men. What I think it means is not Earth-based. I found a list of fleet-to-fleet transfers and a list of ship names. I looked these ships up. They weren't US Navy ships. What I saw made me believe they have some kind of spaceship off-planet, plural. The Americans have a secret spaceship, I ask. That's what this trickle of evidence has led me to believe. So I suspect they have a vast secret space program. And one might ask, well, where are these ships launched from? My best guess would be the South Pole. There are lots of rumours about bases at the South Pole and people who have spoken about technology being transferred to the South Pole. And what about funding? Well, perhaps they had funding from the Strategic Defence Initiative, and as I mentioned in part one, the black budget that they get from selling heroin. I'm going to talk about animal mutilation, something which I've been heavily involved with a group calling itself the Animal Pathology Field Unit. I'm just going to summarise the phenomenon, because this is something which isn't reported correctly in our mainstream media. Throughout the world, including parts of the UK, since at least 1954, animals known to be in perfect physical health are found dead with very peculiar injuries on and inside their bodies. The nature is surgical and cannot be explained with animal predation. This is confirmed by pathologists. Although thousands of cases worldwide are known about, no human being has ever been seen, caught or arrested for mutilation incidents. Orange spheres or white spheres are sometimes witnessed in the areas where animals are found. Now, I produced a film a few years ago about this called Silent Killers. This is about an hour and 10-minute film which charts the work of the Animal Pathology Field Unit, a volunteer group of people who will go out and investigate some of these animals that have had surgical procedures carried out on them. And I'm just going to list some of the characteristics of these surgical procedures that are found. Just to mention that that group in the past has had a pathologist working with them, Professor Tony Fremont, and one of his quotes of the things that they've looked into is that I don't see how this can be done by us. Now, the lady on the right here is Linda Moulton Howe, and she, in the 1970s and 80s, extensively researched and reported on animal mutilations taking place in the United States. David Caton on the left here in the UK. Now, that photograph there is that's what happens when a fox or something or a predator kills animals. There's blood and guts, and it's a mess. Another example there, shit, blood and guts. Now, just compare that with some of the injuries that are found on these animals with surgical precision holes in their body. Here's a lamb. Zoom in on that. Now, this lamb was found with this surgical hole in its body where the fur appears to have been removed as if it's been prepared for surgery. Now, the organs in that animal had been removed as well, and often what happens in these cases, internal organs are removed, large internal organs, through holes which seem to be too small for the organs to fit. And another interesting part, if you just look at the edge on that incision, it's actually sealed. So the Animal Pathology Field Unit, they believe that there's some kind of either high heat or some kind of laser being used to open up these holes. Various other characteristics also crop up again and again and again, and this is in various parts of the UK. There are hotspots. One of the characteristics is a jaw strip where animals have flesh cleanly removed from the bone. Here are some examples, and these are animals which the previous day are running around perfectly healthy. Now, that injury there is impossible to achieve with a knife. If you cut an animal's jaw to remove its jaw flesh, you end up with knife marks on the bone. These animals have their jaws stripped completely clean, which is inexplicable. That particular photograph there is from Dartmoor, and the Animal Pathology Field Unit, it took them 5 years of Freedom of Information requests to get these images of mutilated sheep. Quite often the tongue is removed with a clean incision. Now, here are some of the characteristics. There are never any traces of blood on the ground, and some of these animals are found to have most of their blood exsanguinated, so there's no blood left in the carcass at all, but yet there's not one drop on the floor. There's never any tracks or footprints found, often in remote, inhospitable locations. Lights are often witnessed, sometimes helicopters, but also sometimes orange spheres. And again, we've had unusual ground markings reported in these locations where these activities are going on, and here's some photographs of some. Now, the phenomenon is not limited to farm animals, wild animals and domestic animals. It's a worldwide phenomenon, and the attacks are extremely covert in nature. There's very little evidence of people being seen or caught making these incisions, these surgical incisions in animals. There are hotspots of activity. Dartmoor, there's many cases of sheep on Dartmoor. There's a hotspot in Radnor Forest in Wales. Now, this guy, Lieutenant Philip J. Corso, who was involved in the taking technology from the recovered Roswell craft, alien craft, and deriving things like fiber optics and other technologies which were introduced into industry. This guy oversaw that project, and he has claimed, he's no longer with us, but in the past he claimed that he saw top secret documents in the Pentagon dated 1951 which stated that the animal mutilation phenomenon is an extraterrestrial phenomenon, which would explain why no one's ever been seen or caught in any of these incidents or arrested. And Timothy Good's book Unearthly Disclosure actually describes, I'm just going to read an extract for it, something which sheds light on the covert nature of these attacks. This is an attack which took place in 1994 in the United States. It says, during a wave of livestock mutilations in New Mexico, Colorado and Nevada, Larry Gardia was checking a herd of cattle belonging to Estevan Sanchez in Luna Canyon, near Las Vegas, northeast New Mexico, when he heard a loud, dull hum like a transformer or the sound an arc welder makes. The cows began running away from the noise, but Gardia noticed that 3 of the cows appeared to be pulled by an invisible beam towards the sound. They were struggling and bawling and were pulled through the trees, said Gardia. I shot at the beam with a 30.06 rifle and the hum stopped and the cows stopped bawling. 1 cow was found dead and mutilated, another injured and another missing. So we can see there we've had people who've witnessed these things happening, but they can't, whatever's doing it is invisible. So it seems. And another investigator in the UK, who's a retired police sergeant who had many, many cases of animal mutilation reported to him in the Yorkshire region, he reported on some farmers near the Whitby area in the northeast who were getting so sick of sheep turning up with these surgical incisions on their body, they were losing livestock, so they set up cameras, infrared cameras, to trigger, or infrared equipment to trigger cameras and try and capture evidence of it, and they staked out this field. So that this group of farmers stayed up all night. The camera triggered once, and all that was on the film was just a clouded image. And right below them, right next to where they were staked out, there was a mutilated sheep. So this sheds light on this covert nature for whatever is doing this. Now I tried to find, ask the question, has there ever been any witnesses to these events? And I managed to find 2 cases where this, allegedly people have actually seen this happen. One of them, I found, someone sent me this. This is Flying Saucer Review. This is a copy from 1978. Now there was a story in there entitled Poached and written by Jenny Randalls. Now Jenny Randalls is a UFO author who is very skeptical of UFOs now, but this is in the days before she turned. And this what happened, there was these 4 young lads who were out catching pheasant, and they were hiding to try and poach these pheasant. And they witnessed a metallic glowing sphere, brightly glowing. It was like an arc welder. It hurt their eyes. And it was about 15 feet above the level of the river, and it just came along, and they were all absolutely stunned by it. They thought initially, it's a satellite fallen to Earth, but then they thought, well, no, it's being intelligently controlled. And it landed in front of them. This is an artist's impression. And what they saw, and this is corroborated by all 4 of them, and they weren't very willing witnesses. It took quite a bit for them to actually publicize their story. These 2 beings came out of this craft, and there was cows in the field next to where they were, but the cows seemed to be paralyzed, motionless, still alive, but motionless. These 2 beings got out of the craft, and they started laying out these rods, like metalwork, around one of the cows and building a cage around this cow. Now, at that point, they got so freaked out that they ran off. And anyone who wants to read this entire article about it, it took place in a place called Frodsham, which I think is in Cheshire. This was in 1978. Now, there's one other case that I'm aware of where someone has witnessed. This isn't obviously an animal mutilation case, but it's some kind of abduction. In 1983, Linda Moulton Howe reported on a case. Now, these drawings, when you get witness drawings, sometimes they look a bit wacky because they're drawn by the witness. But this couple witnessed flashing lights over their field one morning, and they actually witnessed, this is what they report, again, a cow seemingly immobilized but alive, and these 2 beings start moving their hands over the top of it, and they floated it into this craft where there was 2 other beings standing by. So they witnessed. So there are at least 2 cases that I know of reliable witnesses that report a cow abduction, but not mutilation. And now I believe that I've been in touch with a guy in the States called Dr. Philip Duke, who has tried to piece together what's going on with these animal abduction and mutilations. And what he believes is that in the same way that the polio vaccine is grown inside a horse, he believes that these animals have been used to grow vaccines or some other kind of agents. There's some part of the animal's biology that is being used as a factory to produce something that they need. And how he explains the evidence is that they basically, let's say they're going to target a certain field of cows that they want to grow something inside, use the cows as an incubator, that they will put something inside the cows, an agent, or inject them in some way, something inside its body. They will then tag those animals with a tracking device in the jaw. 3 weeks might go by while the animal grows antibodies resistance against whatever they've put in the animal. They then use the tracking device to find the animal. They cut its tongue off. They then test the tissue of the tongue to make sure that it is what they want. When you go to the doctor often asks you to put your tongue out to assess your health. So perhaps that's why they cut the tongue off. They then exsanguinate the blood, take the soft tissue organs, and before they leave, the last thing they do is jaw strip the animal to take away the implant or the tracking device. That's how Dr. Philip Duke explains this evidence. Now, if you believe certain authors with regards to the abduction phenomenon, there is a worldwide abduction phenomenon, people are being taken, and he believes that they're growing antibodies in order to protect their abductees, that whatever it is that they're taking from these animals are being put into their abductees to give them protection, and he believes it's protection against HIV, or at least it's one of the things that they're growing inside these animals. Obviously, the animal pathology field unit that I've been working with, we're trying to get proof of this, but it's not easy, you know, because you go on a farm and you're asked to remove a dead sheep. I mean, I got warned off by my local animal health people. They said, I put an advert in the Farmer's Guardian asking for farmers to come forward with mutilation cases, and they rang me up and said, you do realise, Richard, it's illegal to remove animal parts from farms and all this, you know, so they try to warn me. But I think there's a definite link between the animal mutilation phenomenon and abduction.